today's masterclass, as you know, we've been looking at industry experts throughout the year. And today's masterclass is someone that I worked with, I won't say how many years ago, but when he was the CEO of Demix, and known as one of the nicest men in retail, and certainly killing it in his new role as CEO of Destination New South Wales. So just to give you a little bit of a background, Steve Cox, when we worked together, he was working in a business that was losing 7% per month in growth in the book industry. So you can just imagine, before you've even hit profit, you have to make up 7%. And he led that business. He started in this role, we're saying in May 2020. Yeah. As COVID, was in full force, and has led Destination New South Wales through COVID. So some incredible leadership there through crisis and stress. We've also got our wonderful industry mentor, Melissa Hoyer. So thank you for attending as well today. He'll be running a Q&A session at the end. So if I could have a wonderful round of applause for Steve, welcoming him to the stage.
Thank you. There we go. Everything seems to be working. I've got a challenge with the cameraman today. He says, I'll have a routine, so I'm just going to try and mix it up from time to time. Good morning. Good to see you all. And it's wonderful to be here. Thank you very much for the kind invitation. Look, there's quite a bit to get through today, so I'm going to try and move relatively quickly to make sure there's plenty of time for Q&A. But if anyone has any questions or queries, look, I think there's a process for it, but just put your hand up as far as I'm concerned. That's fine by me as well. Okay? So let's get into it. Of course, before we get started, just recognise the traditional custodians of land upon which we're meeting today. I would normally say the Gadigal people, but I'm actually not sure what it is here. I need to find out. Certainly it is in the city. And just pay my respects to elders past and present and anybody who may be with us today. Really important from the tourism and visitation perspective, of course, as well. New South Wales has the largest Aboriginal population of anywhere in Australia, which I think most Australians probably don't necessarily realise. Western Sydney is the largest population in a single place and anywhere in Australia as well. So certainly within our strategy, Aboriginal tourism and raising the cultural focus is really important to what we do. Okay, so Destination New South Wales, just who are we, what do we do, what are we about? So our purpose is to deliver economic and social benefit for the people in New South Wales by growing the visitor economy. So everything that we do is aligned in growing the visitor economy. Our vision is, as we set out when I first started about 2 and a bit years ago, first thing I did was work with the team and lots of different stakeholders to write the Visitor Economy Strategy 2030. So as students, that would be the first thing I would go to if you want to take a note of some kind. Go to the Destination New South Wales website. Everything that I'm going to go through today is on there. Everything that we are doing is aligned to that strategy. And that was a whole of government strategy. It was approved by Cabinet by October of the year before last. It was a public document from January of last year. And it guides the entire New South Wales government on a roadmap to 2030 to achieve the outcomes that we've set. So we want to be the premier visitor economy of the Asia Pacific. When we wrote it, I specifically said Asia Pacific. We weren't about trying to beat Melbourne or Queensland or wherever else. It was very much about lifting our heads up, saying New South Wales and Sydney should be the very best within this region. And that's the goals that we're driving towards. And then it has an economic value to it of $65 billion in turnover by 2030. So the visitor economy, I almost never use the word tourism, mainly because I think it sort of narrows people's mindsets to, an American with a hat on and a old school camera if you're as old as me, and doesn't really recognise the full value of the visitor economy. And certainly one thing COVID's taught us all, I think, is what happens when you don't have visitors. So the restaurants don't operate, the people who launder the tablecloths don't get business, the people who supply the cutlery and the plates don't get business, the taxi drivers don't get business, the hotels. So the visitor economy is very broad. In New South Wales in 2019, I think it was about $35 billion worth of turnover. It was around about 6% of gross state product. So it is not an insignificant number. It's a very large industry. And then our focus is to get it to $65 billion by 2030, which would be around about 7, maybe even 8% of gross state product by that period of time. I'm not going to labour on all the slides, so I'm sure the deck will be supplied to everybody. There's no secrets in it, so please feel free to take them afterwards. But this is really what I was relating to. The visitor economy really is everybody's business, and it is one of my roles is about opening up everybody's eyes to the breadth of the visitor economy, and also getting everyone within the visitor economy to work together to get the most out of it. So when we put on big events, and there are the next year in Sydney is going to be absolutely epic. Starting from about October this year, you've got the T20 World Cup, UCI Road Race in Wollongong, Women's Basketball World Cup, Sydney Festival, World Pride, which is just going to be next level for 3 weeks. I don't know how I'll stay awake, but anyway, we'll just keep partying for 3 weeks. Then there's some other things. Then we've got Vivid, which we're going to put food into next year for the first time, so we'll be launching Vivid Food. Then we've got the Women's Football World Cup, which is one of the very largest events in the entire world, with all the finals being played here in Sydney. And then my personal favourite, because I've worked on it for over 2 years, South by Southwest is coming to Sydney in October of next year. So, and that's just, I know I've missed a whole pile, but they're the sort of the big pieces. That's a year like no other in Sydney's history, really. And certainly, maybe you have to go back to the Olympics to get anywhere near that level of event operations within this city in that period of time. So there's a lot to look forward to. So I've referenced this. The Visitor Economy Strategy 2030 is the roadmap. So it's the roadmap that was written by Destination New South Wales with a broad group of stakeholders. It was actually the very first time that our organisation had written the strategy. So when I started, there was a previous strategy that was written by a bunch of people, experts, whatever, from external to the organisation, but it wasn't really lived and breathed within the organisation. Our organisation was very siloed. It was siloed internally. Marketing didn't really talk to events, didn't really talk to sort of business development, etc. It was siloed within government, so it was seen very much as a sort of this little thing that sat on its own and wasn't embedded within government, but it was quite siloed from industry as well. So this was great for me, having started with no tourism experience and no government experience. The opportunity to get going on a full strategic review and setting a strategic framework meant that I spoke to hundreds and hundreds of operators right across the industry, across all parts of New South Wales from day dot, and the whole team came together and worked. And I think this strategy I know is being used as a benchmark for other states. The Queensland government are about to release theirs. They got a group together to work on their strategy, and they sent an email which was forwarded to me by a friend to say, we're going to do our strategy, and here's the New South Wales one as a benchmark. So it really does set the tone for what we're doing. When you look at the document, there's a couple of pages in it that kind of really summarise what we're doing, and I'm just mindful of, I'm just going to keep a really close eye on time. If there are 3 phases to the strategy. So the first phase is the recovery phase, so we're all within that. So by 2024, the goal is to get our visitor economy spend back up to 2019 levels by the end of 24. Now, I think we're broadly on track with that. A lot will depend upon if and when the Chinese come back, but broadly speaking, we're relatively close. In fact, many parts of New South Wales are well above their 2019 levels because Sydney-siders have gone and filled up New South Wales. So when I first started, there's a guy called Simon McGrath who used to be the CEO of Accor Hotels. Simon's now the CEO of Crown. He was on my selection panel. And in the very beginning, he said, Steve, don't spend too much time marketing Bowral. He said, it doesn't take many people from Sydney to fill up Bowral, but it takes a lot of barrels to fill up Sydney. And that's exactly what we've seen through this pandemic. Sydney has gone out and filled up the regions, but there's just not enough to come in. So Sydney has been more impacted by the pandemic than anywhere else. It's got a higher reliance on international, higher reliance on business travel. And obviously there isn't that population to come through here. So that's the recovery phase. And we'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. Momentum phase is sort of coming out of that recovery. And then from 26 to 30, it's an acceleration phase. And that's predicated on sort of 2, I would say 3, for me, the largest growth opportunities for the New South Wales visitor economy. Number 1 is that we will have a brand new 24-hour, 7 days a week airport. International airport at Western Sydney. One of the biggest constraints for New South Wales over the past decade has been aviation. So the airport only has X number of slots allocated to international. It's got a curfew that no government's going to change because it's too central to the city and that would be political suicide. So they're not going to change the curfew. So it has in effect run basically at capacity for a long period of time. And what that has meant is as airlines have wanted to increase their routes into Australia, Sydney's been full, so they've been moving them to Melbourne or to Brisbane or to other locations. So the new airport at the end of 26 will be an absolute game changer. There is no curfew, which is great for airlines because they can fly the times that they want to fly and then do all their connecting routes globally. So normally they have to meet with the Sydney curfew, but it's really good for us as well because it's going to bring in a big supply of visitation from the international. And the airport will open with 2 runways in 26, and then I think off the top of my head it's got capacity to go up to 4. So that's a real game changer. Western Sydney itself, now there's an enormous amount of investment in Western Sydney. 1 in 7 Australians lives in Western Sydney already. It is underrepresented, I think, when you think about Sydney, certainly underrepresented when you look at the offering of the visitor economy more broadly. So we're doing a lot of work in that space as well. And then the other one is just international. So Australians, New South Wales people, there's 27 million of us on the last census, thereabouts. We spend more in total dollars when travelling overseas than the entire rest of the world, which is 7 billion plus people spend coming here. So there is a net deficit in the visitor economy spend in this country, which to me just doesn't make any sense. Why should 27 million Australians be able to spend more overseas than the entire rest of the world coming here? So over the course of the next 10 years, working with the feds, working with Tourism Australia and ourselves, it's really about trying to start to change that and shift that back, and that new airport will be a big part of that as well. The next part there, you've got the strategic pillars. So those 5 strategic pillars we also adopted within Destination New South Wales. I'm going to move pretty quickly. Road to Recovery, I think we've touched on. Build the brand. We launched a new brand, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Last year, we've never had a brand for New South Wales previously, so we've now got the feel new positioning. I'll talk about that. Showcase our strengths, so really being clear on what our strengths are, what our emerging strengths need to be. So Aboriginal tourism is a good example of that. So I wouldn't say it's a strength for New South Wales today, but it's definitely somewhere we want to have a real strength in the period ahead. So we are actively working on plans to get that. Food and drinks, probably another area. It is actually a strength today, but it's underrepresented in the minds of visitors. Invest in world-class events. So South by, bringing out FC Barcelona, the success of Vivid. We will continue to invest in events. And since I joined, we now have a major event strategy. We didn't actually have a major event strategy in the past. So there was no real strategic alignment to which events we invested in. We can't do them all. We want to be the major event capital of the Asia Pacific. That doesn't mean that we have to have everything that's in Melbourne or Brisbane or whatever else. It just means that we've got to have the best broad events calendar of anywhere in the world. And whenever you come to Sydney or New South Wales, you will know you're very close to a big flagship event, or underneath that there will be fantastic new things happening all the time in arts, culture, creative industries, sport, whatever it might be. The theatres, we've just opened a new theatre, we've got another 2 new theatres coming. So there's a lot to look forward to in that space as well. And then facilitating growth. So basically my role is really to lobby within government to clear the way so that the visitor economy can grow. I've got an independent board. We are a legislated body, so it's kind of a bit unique in government, very much runs like a business. I report directly to the Minister, Minister Ayres, but fundamentally our job is to help all of the industry grow, so help organisations like this one with training and making sure we've got the right people coming through, and then making sure that there's no legislative impediments to, if someone wants to start a 5-star hotel in Broken Hill, if there's something in the way of achieving that, then how can we change government policy to enable those sorts of things to happen? And then the guiding principles. First one's really simple, put the visitor first. Basically the visitor at the centre of everything that we think about. It's retail 101 from my background, put the customer at the centre. It's really making sure that everything that we do is aligned to who the visitor is, which visitors we're looking for, and targeting, and then making sure that everyone's aligned to that at the core of what we do. And that's really important, and it relates to, we're doing an aviation attraction fund I'll talk about in a minute. Which countries, which people do we want? I'm not interested in the number of people coming. I'm interested in the value of the money that gets spent here by the people that are coming. So it's high value, high yield, repeat visitors. Good for sustainability. We don't want, getting the numbers right is important. The only challenge is the entire world is looking for the same people, but it's the yield that you're really looking for. Lead with our strengths. I think I've said enough about that. Move fast, be responsive and agile. So as an organisation, and my background has always been commercial, it's about realising that we're in a very competitive market. And with an Asia Pacific focus, if we don't do something, Singapore will do it, Japan will do it, Korea will do it, India will do it, China will do it, or in Australia, Melbourne, Brisbane, whatever it might be. So we do have to move fast and be agile. It's the ways that we work. So often in government, things have to be tested to the nth degree before you do something because everyone's a bit risk averse. We don't do that. We test and learn and we iterate, and I would rather do something, do the first 20% that gives us 80% of the benefit and then learn from it, than wait and do the entire 100% and spend 1 or 2 years before we actually get the thing off the ground. So that test and learn mentality is really important. Agile ways of working are really important so that we're doing more than one thing at one time, breaking large projects down into smaller pieces. All of those principles, which I'm sure in some of your course notes, are fundamental to successful business operations today and a core to what we do. And then collaboration. So, our budget this year is $435 million, which is the most we've ever had, which is good, but it's still very small in comparison to the broader government focus on the visitor economy. So we have to collaborate with national parks, with regional, with transport, with trains, with placemaking New South Wales, Crown lands, where a lot of the caravan parks are on, those sorts of things. It really has to be a collaborative effort, but also really importantly has to be a collaborative effort with industry. So we have to work with industry very closely to help bring them along. So during the pandemic, every single week on a Friday afternoon, I did a visitor economy call for about 140, 150 people, and we just updated them on everything that's happening within the visitor economy. They gave us feedback on the call. This policy's wrong. Mask mandates need to go. QR codes aren't working. The voucher schemes need to be extended. All that kind of stuff, and that all fed straight into government policy. In fact, I invited the minister to many of those calls so that we could make changes right there and then, and move forward. So that's what that one is all about. I'm not going to talk to that. I think I've covered it off. The guiding principles are important, and they absolutely align to our work. There should be no surprises for any of my competitors or any of you what we are doing. It is all within the visitor economy strategy. The one thing that's probably not called out as strongly in this as it should be, and I'm going to be resolving that going forward, is really sustainability. And so we do annual reviews of our strategy, and I've very much put sustainability on the agenda over the next 3 years. We're behind the 8 ball, I would say, today, but we won't be over the course of the coming period of time. I've had lots of conversations, and we're just aligning our strategy in that space. And the strategic pillars, I won't touch on that. I think we've covered that one off as well. Road to recovery, I think I probably covered much of this, but that's really what it's all about. Build the workforce, make it easy for people to get back, do all the things that we have to do to re-establish the visitor economy in New South Wales. Too many stats for me to dwell on there, but fundamentally it just says that things are starting to come back, and which is good. So aviation's returning. So I spoke to Jeff from the airport, Jeff Colbert's CEO at the airport. They think they'll be at 60%, was 80, 60% capacity international by October. And next year, getting much closer back to 100%. None of us know what's going to happen in China. The general consensus is, I think there's some big thing where Xi Jinping gets re-established as leader in October. Not much likely to happen before that, but from October onwards, anything can happen. But demand is certainly there. Chinese students are coming back. The university student intake is at about 55% at the moment, I think off the top of my head, of its normal numbers, but they'll be close back to 100% next year. So there's a lot of good things happening and getting people back. Business events are coming back very, very strongly. All the key pieces of the visitor economy are important. You guys are very, very important. Students, the international student spend of the visitor economy spend in New South Wales is 45% of our total international spend from visitors relates to students. So we work with Study New South Wales and with other bodies also in that space to get more out of the student populations that are coming in. They're a really important part of the visitor economy more broadly. Aviation Attraction Fund I've touched on. So we fought hard for this, and so as students, don't ever give up. So particularly if you ever end up working in government, New South Wales has never had an aviation attraction fund. I put this up with Jeff Colbert from the airport and said, look, we need an aviation attraction fund. The whole world's changed. All the flight routes are gone. We want to attract the high yield, high value airlines back into New South Wales, and it's a very, very competitive market. So I put it up back in the last year, I think it was, year before, got rejected. But that laid the groundwork to then get it accepted. And so lots of lobbying, lots of conversations with premiers and treasurers and everybody else. And eventually we helped everyone understand that we do need to build back the aviation. And this is about bringing back the high value, high yield routes, so the ones that we want to grow. Direct flights from India is a good example. Korea's in there, Japan's in there, US is in there. So there's a whole host. It's about making sure that if we've got a capped airport, that we build it back to be better than what it was before, with higher yield, higher return visitation from priority markets that are important to us. So that ultimately between then and the new airport opening, the value of the people travelling into Sydney Airport will be higher than what it was before. There won't be more people because the airport pretty much runs at capacity, but what we want is a higher yielding visitor to come back in. And that $60 million is matched by the airport and the airlines. Our money normally goes towards marketing, so we might do a deal with, I don't know, just pick an airline, any of the airlines, JAL, and airport does a discount on their fees at the airport. We put in money to market the flight to help fill the seats, and then it's all about getting them back to accelerating their return in visitation between now and the end of this financial year, which is when this runs out. Build the brand. So we touched on, we didn't have a brand position. Brand position is really important. When people think about things, when you think about a Louis Vuitton bag, there is a very automatically what that brand represents and what it's all about. It's the same when people think about where they're going to go and visit. They need to have an association with what the brand's about. There's a thing called the McKinsey Loyalty Loop. So if I was a student, I would write that down, McKinsey Loyalty Loop. It's something I used to use in retail, but it basically talks about if people are aware of a brand at the time they first start considering a purchase, and these numbers are a bit outdated now, but there's a 40% greater chance that brand will get selected for the purchase. And then the loyalty loop part is about getting them to come back. So that they don't go through the consideration set, because with online and everything, it's very easy to find every destination in the world where you could go to. But what we have to do over time is build a brand that's strong enough that people go, no, I want to come to Sydney, I want to come to New South Wales, because they understand what we're about. So we're in sort of day one of a 20-year approach to brand. The brand positioning that we came to was built off this, ability to energise you like nowhere else. And really our core differential is a collision of diverse natural wonders and vibrant culture that energises you long after. And that was kind of the brand idea. Sydney is the 5th most multicultural city in the world. We've got incredible diversity, but what makes us really unique is that you can have that diversity and then go surfing at night or go through the national parks or whatever else it might be. So it's quite unique. Feel New was the brand position. So 100% pure New Zealand was kind of my benchmark when we were looking at this place. That's been going for 24 years. I think it's been a fantastic brand position for New Zealand and been very, very effective for them. So we will use Feel New. And I'm not going to go through the architecture. It's in your slide deck. So in the interests of giving plenty of time for Q&A, I'll let you guys have a look at that. And I'm sure that through the connections here, if you've got any questions, you can email me or whatever else, that's fine. So I won't dwell on that. I will show you the ad. Hopefully some of you have seen it before. Hopefully it plays.
It's in all of us. That craving to feel energized again. To feel new. To see something new that will blow our minds. Or meet someone new who will change it. To discover a new experience. And something new about ourselves. Welcome to New South Wales. A place to feel alive. To feel free. And most of all, to feel new again.
That was the first ad that we did, and ad one of the whole campaign, and then we'll look at the different pillars. A couple of fun facts. Azura Ryder was the singer. She's a Northern Beaches girl. And the storm that was there wasn't there. They just photoshopped it in later on. So anyway, it's amazing what you can do. Showcase our strengths. I think I've touched on this reasonably. Again, if you're going to sell a product, and one of the reasons why I could transition quite seamlessly from retail into what I do now is that at the end of the day, it's the same thing, right? Instead of selling books, I sell Sydney and New South Wales. You got to know who your customer is, visitor, customer. You got to understand what the value proposition is of what it is that you're selling. So what makes that unique features and benefits of Sydney, or what's the unique features and benefits of the book? And I don't have to compete with Amazon in the same way that I used to, so it's a little bit easier. And people definitely want to keep traveling, whereas reading is always one of those things that maybe people do other things. So I think it's a bit easier and certainly a lot more fun. So showcase our strengths we've touched on. Again, I'm not going to read through all of those. I think we've covered them off to some degree, but it's been clear on what our strengths are. So how do we make the ones we've got bigger and stronger? But it's also clear on where we think we need to develop further strengths. So nature-based tourism, sustainable tourism, Aboriginal tourism, food and drink, those sort of pillars are all ones that we need to do work on to lift. But it can't just be us, it's got to be with the industry. We also do at Destination New South Wales a lot of training programs. So we help operators get their product ready to sell internationally, or get ready to sell their products to sell domestically. So we do a lot of new product workshops, and then we connect new products, as in new offerings within the visitor economy, to the buyer and seller ecosystem, either domestically or globally. So all that happens through us as well. Investing in world-class events is always good fun. So events are really, really important. They drive visitation, they drive spend, but they also deliver social benefit. We all love an event. And I remember the day I walked out of my office and went down when Vivid first started, to see the crowds of people with big smiles on their face. You could see it very clearly through that. But they also lift the brand. So events add to the brand of a city, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to get South by Southwest, because that brand has a very, very unique proposition. It's recognised by everybody in the creative industry. The Minister said, Steve, why don't we just create it? And I said, Minister, you can't create a brand like that and just expect that it's going to, even if we do an outstanding job. It's been running for 36 years in America. It's going to take us a long time to get that brand position. So branding is important as well. I think we've got a quick video on some of the major brands. There you go. My team does all of these videos. We've got an incredibly talented team. But here's a taste of why we're the event capital. All of that's done by our team. When I first started, we took an idea to on TV in an ad within 14 days, all of it done in-house. So, the opportunities for people to work at an organisation like ours extends right across. It's quite a diverse area. And of course, this one here as well, South by Southwest Sydney. We announced the other day, that took me 2 years to land that deal, literally 2 years. I had the Premier of this state, who was then Treasurer, sign to agree to it in Christmas Eve, 7 p.m. 2 years ago. And then it took another year and to actually get the final deal done. But we've got this as well. I think there's a very short video. I'm mindful of time, but I think we've got enough time to give you a sense of what it's all about.
What makes South by Southwest so unique is the premise behind it, combining tech, music, movies, and that kind of creates a unique energy that you don't find in other places.
In 1987, South by Southwest started as a way for people to meet and share ideas. 36 years later, this still holds true, and the event has evolved with dedication to our purpose of helping creative people achieve their goals. We're excited to expand the event to Australia. With its culture focused on the future, Sydney is the ideal city to bring the professional opportunities and unexpected discoveries that make our event unique.
So Sydney has an amazing creative scene. We have musicians, we have visual artists, and we have everything in between. It's going to be the most extraordinary opportunity for them to all come together for South by to showcase to the world what we can achieve.
South by is not an event that happens on a single day. It's a community of people. It's a community that's active and vibrant. I'm going to meet somebody who is fascinating, somebody who is breaking boundaries and doing new things, and I'm going to have a great experience.
Good things happen when you bring together highly creative people, mix them with great entertainment in a great city.
So within 2 hours of us announcing South by, I had the head of Amazon, Google, News Corporation, Nine Corporation, and American Express all contact me and say they want to be partners of South by. And that was just the 5 that contacted me, not to mention the rest of it. So it is going to be an absolutely massive thing. And if you guys are involved in events, then you might be able to get involved as well. I won't touch on this too long. That's the new airport that's opening in Western Sydney. I think we've covered that in detail. And that's it. I think I'm close to my 20-minute time zone. But there's the follows. If you look for me on LinkedIn, you'll find me. You can always send me a message if you want anything. Team can give you my email and mobile number, that's fine. If I can help any of you students out at any time, don't ever hesitate to get in touch. I hope I've touched on a few things that at least give you some ideas, and if there's anything else I can do to help, let me know. I think we've got some Q&A now.
We do. Yeah. Thank you very, very much. If I can have a big round of applause. Thank you, Stu. I thought I was busy in 2023, but apparently not. It's amazing. We're now going to introduce our beloved Melissa Hoyer, who is our mentor, industry mentor for ICMS, to do a bit of a Q&A.
We love Q&A.
We do. So I'll hand over to you two. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. How exciting. My gosh. I've dealt with Steve for, is my sound okay? I probably don't even need a microphone. I'm a bit boisterous.
You like me.
It's funny, I've dealt with Steve and particularly his marketing team, even throughout all of COVID, and I thought it was just ironic that you happened to start in May of 2020, like the worst time. But what you've done is extraordinary. But just before we get into the Q&A, what I found really interesting and as a journalist and dealing with Destination New South Wales, no matter whether COVID was happening or not, what the marketing team would deliver was constant. So every week we would get either a media release or a package or something to say, look, you know what, don't forget that northern New South Wales, you can still, when we could travel, you can still go there. Southern New South Wales, there was a big push, I know, to go sort of south, particularly after the bushfires in early 2020. So, what I find extraordinary about what you've done with Destination New South Wales is continue, even though we've gone through the absolute worst couple of years. So, number one, kudos for that.
Thank you. Well done. Great job. Thank you.
Looking at, it was actually quite exciting looking at that video when you actually see sport, you see entertainment, you see fashion, you see shows, you see things like Vivid. Is there one particular area though, within that huge umbrella, Steve, that you really personally like? It's probably hard. It's like having 5 different children. But
yeah, look, I think I've South by is probably the one the day I started working on landing South by, and it took literally 2 years. It was on life support on numerous occasions. Partners, the first partner was Live Nation. Their CEO said during COVID, we're not going to do anything new. They pulled out. I got Jeff Jones from TEG to get in. It was quite a thing. So, and I love that concept, creative industries, which I'm a big fan of, and that's something we certainly are dialing up for Sydney and New South Wales. But look, the broad, great shows. I loved Hamilton. I went eight times to Hamilton. I'm very fortunate. I get to go to a lot of different things.
You get good tickets.
Yeah. The important thing, I think, is just having that breadth. And we've got the Sydney Modern opening on the 3rd of December this year, which is going to be amazing. We've just signed off a very significant investment for their first year of events that will be happening around the Sydney Modern. You've got the Opera House birthday. There's so much going on. I think for me, our event portfolio has just got to be a lot more than sport. Yes. Sport's great and it's important. And then our major event strategy highlights particular sports and particular areas that we want to win on. So football is one, so as in the round ball football. Strategically, we want to be the home of football. It's got the biggest global following. So when we brought out FC Barcelona a couple of months ago, I did that deal. FC Barcelona has the largest social following of any football team in the entire world, something like 480 million people. So even bigger than Man U or Liverpool or anyone else. So when you bring a brand like that, the reach that we get globally to, say, Sydney is enormous. So football is a really important pillar. Mass participation events, there's an announcement coming up in the not too distant future about a large mass participation event that you can keep an eye out for, and you go, we heard about that when we were here. They're really important. So it's a breadth.
And then when you look at something like the new stadium about to open, are you excited? Because that's only in a couple of months. And that is open. I don't live far from there, so I'm sort of excited. There was a lot
I wish I could tell you everything I'm working on for that.
We can get something out of it.
We've been speaking to some of the very, very largest names in the world. I expect to sign a contract in the next week for the opening concert in that stadium, not the opening day event, but the opening concert. And then I'm expecting to sign another contract, very large.
Obviously large. Okay, keep thinking about who it could be. So obviously sport, Vivid, I think that's really good that you're including next year that food element, because Vivid is such a star anyway on its own, but then now to sort of include, because the food element of New South Wales is so important.
Absolutely.
The amount of fresh produce that we have around the state, the amount of restaurants, obviously through COVID, it tested the mettle of so many restaurants and hospitality areas. But so why did you make that decision to sort of start fusing sort of restaurants and food into Vivid?
So, because we know that we've got the best food offering in the Asia Pacific, but most people don't think we do. So we want to elevate food. We're actively considering a large major food event of some type, but it's not easy just to say which one, because there's lots of food events, and if we do it, we want to have something that really drives international visitation. So that's taking a period of time. So the first cab off the rank that we thought, well, we could do something that can elevate food and made absolutely sense in its alignment, nighttime, creative, food's a creative process, was Vivid. So we did a test at Maryvale. We did a big supper. That went exceptionally well, and so now we're rolling it out. And we made a number of changes to Vivid this year. So I took it out of the domain. It used to be in the park gardens. Took it out of the gardens because there's no business in the gardens. And then we wrapped it all the way around down to Central. So the benefit to that's been very significant. The restaurants and bars were about 30% up on any record they've ever had over
Which was surprising as well, because it was freezing cold. It was end of May, early June.
It wasn't raining,
particularly this year. It wasn't raining, but
for a change.
But cold. But you're going to the city.
Yeah, it was packed.
And it was absolutely packed.
It was absolutely packed.
It's really been. Do you find? Obviously this year.
We had 2.6 million visitors.
Yeah, I was just wondering.
Biggest
ever. So international or.
So total numbers was 2.598 million people came to Vivid. Wow. The previous record was 2.4. International was about 3 to 4% of it, which was actually pretty good.
Well, that's pretty good considering not really many people could even get in.
Exactly.
I was really interested when you said the amount or the percentage of students whose money is spent within New South Wales. I mean, tell me a little bit about that.
The student spend's large because they stay here for such a long period of time. So, there are obviously higher value individuals who come and stay at Crown and spend a lot of money in a short period of time. But the student-related spend, because they stay for 12 months and then go home and come back for 12 months, it's very large and very significant. So, our team works with people that study New South Wales and others to understand that. And again, put the visitor in first mindset. How do we make sure that their experience here is as good as it can be, that their families, friends, etc., know what's here? And then how do we drive repeat visitation, which is something we'll do more and more focusing on in the period ahead.
And you look at it on a day like today, blue and beautiful. I don't know about everyone else here, but if you've been scrolling through your Instagram accounts, everyone is away apart from us.
Yeah.
But you look at a day like today, you suddenly go, you know what? But Sydney, New South Wales, we do blue, we do amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
So we just have to cope with these couple of cold months before we can say that we are pulling up. We are Greece. We are Ibiza.
No doubt about it. And look, people, like the South by announcement, so many people overseas.
That was a huge announcement.
Coming for that. Because everyone wants a reason to come to Sydney, and because that's a business-related event, that'll bring, all the businesses will come just because they want to come to Sydney.
And Pride 2023 too, that will be huge. I think,
so the pre-sale tickets sold out, in 4 hours.
Wow. And I think just to sort of put that into perspective, Pride, it isn't just about being the Mardi Gras that, as we all know, happens throughout March of each year in Sydney. I mean, Pride, it is a serious international event. I mean, what you'll get out of that will be phenomenal. And also they spend a lot of money.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone who comes to Pride, they want to have a good time.
Yeah, absolutely.
They stay in great hotels. They eat really well. They really make it an occasion.
The city will be absolutely alive for that period of time. No doubt.
That's exciting. There was a really important and great focus on our Indigenous fashion designers. Tell me how passionate you are about supporting that, because I know Destination New South Wales are very much behind supporting Australian Fashion Week.
Huge.
So, tell me why you've decided to...
Again, I mean, I think if I think about the brand of the great cities in the world, the places you really want to go to, it is about the culture, it's about the art, it's about fashion, and over time we want to just continue to build that mindset. So there's a saying I always say, people who come to Sydney at the moment, many come to Sydney, they go to Circular Quay, they look at the bridge, they look at the Opera House, they look at the harbour, grab a bite to eat, maybe see a show, get on a plane, go home, and they go, I've done Sydney and that's it. We've really got to start to move this city to become much more of a city of villages, so that when people visit, they feel like I do when I fly out of New York and I stayed on the Lower East Side, next time I'm going to go to Brooklyn because I know I'm going to get a different experience. And you always know that things are changing. And for me, great cities have great galleries, great art, great fashion, great music, a nighttime economy that we can go out after 10 o'clock. All those kind of things are really important. And for me, Fashion Week is a pillar of driving that and of elevating Sydney's brand in that place.
I think that's an important thing about the Sydney experience for visitors, because a lot of people, they'll come to Sydney, they'll do the Harbour Bridge climb, they'll do all those great things, but there is so much outside of our sort of our Sydney bubble. And I think that's what I've observed Destination New South Wales very, very much promoting and getting out there, that there's, look at the bash. And there was 5,000 who did the dance and all those things, and Bathurst, all of these elements, but all of these sort of towns are benefiting from obviously having more people visit them. So that's something you obviously want to work at even more.
Very much so. And Sydney really is the city of villages. You get a different experience in Surrey Hills to the northern beaches, to the eastern beaches, to Campbelltown or to wherever it might be. So right now we've just released an RFQ so we're doing work right now to identify one or two major events for Western Sydney. Right. So kind of think vivid but not vivid. So that scale, globally recognised, bringing international people here. So an RFQ was released for that the other day for us to figure out what to do and what we will do. And then we've also got out a RFT, I think they're called, for somebody to work with us. We're going to do a First Nations event.
Great.
So we're not an Aboriginal event. We want to do a global First Nations event in Sydney. We're the home of the oldest living culture, thought leadership, culture, music, art, all around First Nations, and obviously highlighting Aboriginal Torres Strait Island within that, but a First Nations festival, not an Aboriginal festival. So we're out to market on that as well as we develop that.
But I think that's important about, I mean, obviously Sydney, we know Sydney, it's beautiful, we look up there. But, you know, I mean, the amount of people living well beyond you know, the 30-kilometre sort of bubble that we are all in at the moment. Parramatta, Campbelltown, you know, there is so much going on. And I think at last, the media are realising that. You know, it does become very insular. But suddenly now I think people are going, well, yeah, well, hang on. I live in Parramatta. I'm in Campbelltown. I'm in the mountains. You know, I might have to come into the city for work. But you know, so many creative events. There are galleries. You know, there were artistic pursuits.
The Ramadan festival that was just
absolutely within all of New South Wales.
So we're doing destination management plans at the moment. So we're writing destination management plans for the Central River City and the Western Parkland City with an absolute view to what you're saying. You know, what do we need to invest in? What do we need in Western Sydney to make sure when that airport comes we get the most out of it, but also that we can deliver the best possible outcomes there.
Is there a particular area in New South Wales, apart from probably your home, that you love going to, that you think, okay, I've got a weekend, I want to take my partner, my family, my friends, and just go and have a weekend somewhere?
Oh, look, there really is loads. Look, I have a personal connection to Narooma because that's where my family had a house for quite some time, and I'm kicking my mum and dad who sold the house because they're getting old at 82. Just as Justin Hemmings moves in and buys everything in Narooma, and I was like, just as Justin takes it in Narooma, my parents sell their house, which is a bit disappointing for me. But anyway, so I love Narooma. I mean, I did a post on LinkedIn this morning on Broken Hill. I think that's a really remarkable place. It's just an incredibly different experience. I love the mountains. Particularly in the summer months. Last time I was there, I broke my shoulder and dislocated it. But apart from that,
great memories.
Mountain biking, but beautiful area. And and I quite enjoy that. Northern. I'm in Byron next week for Splendour in the Grass, which will be a bit of fun. So yeah. I mean, I met with trail finders in the UK. And one of the things we have to do in our international position is we've got to change the mindset of the travel agents who sell Australia, and they just go Sydney, Rock Reef and go home, and really have to say to them, everything is in New South Wales. We've got the most accessible coastline, national parks, 15 wine regions, the largest Aboriginal population, snow on the mountains, and the red dirt of the outback. They then said, well, you don't have any quokkas. But then I did say, well, we've got one at the zoo, so we've got the quokkas covered. But it is that mindset, and we're working within our team and Exto. What is a Sydney Plus strategy? How do we sell in that a trip to Australia can be about Sydney, Mudgee, Orange, Broken Hill, Kosciuszko.
And the South Coast. I mean, a couple of trips that I've been on, sort of media for meals to different places on the South Coast. It's beautiful. I actually did a road trip. I got one of those, hired one of those big 9-metre motorhomes in 2021. So when we couldn't go anywhere, and I went with a girlfriend and we motored up. We did Taree, Coffs Harbour, we did beautiful. And then we ended up in Byron, and we just, it was one of the best trips I've ever done. Because I think the one thing too we've all discovered while being, in our lockdown that we were in, is Australia.
Oh, amazing.
And I think that has sort of kicked in. That people are now choosing, apart from now that everyone's in Europe, but people are choosing to go. No, I want to go to the Rock.
Absolutely.
I want to go to Broken Hill. I want to go to. I'll drive up to Byron. I won't just sort of get the plane up. So. If there's one consolation, we have discovered more of New South Wales than we probably ever would have.
Yeah, definitely.
If this all didn't happen.
Exactly.
This shit show. I'm allowed to swear, I think.
Yeah.
But we're getting through it.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, we are. We're very much so.
But
the roaring 2020s are ahead.
Yeah, exactly. We get our 4th booster, and away we go.
We had it last week.
I've got mine this afternoon.
On Monday.
We must have some questions. I'm sure we do. There must be some questions. There's a question. Hello.
Hi.
This is more of a question for me, but I was wondering, are you going to make all these events accessible to disabled people? Because I know there's so many people out there who love to watch movies.
Yep.
I've been to Sydney Film Festival and it's
Yeah.
I was curious about how you going to
Yeah, look, it's an important part of what we do. Certainly, Vivid has a very large accessibility plan. So, I mean, Vivid is a monster of an event. Can't tell you how much work goes into making that event happen. It's got a full accessibility overlay. So that event is owned, operated and managed. Every single part of that event is done by Destination New South Wales. Most of the events that we're involved in, we're an event investor and the event is managed by another party. So South by Southwest, the event will be managed and delivered by TEG, which is part of Silver Lake. So we work to improve accessibility in all of our experiences, and not only within events, but also within tourism operations more broadly. In fact, I was looking just yesterday, we just put up a new accessibility piece on our web pages as well. So it is definitely there. I know we can do more, but you can be assured that we're always thinking about it.
Good question.
Got another one here.
What leadership tips would you give to people looking at, going into events, but then just in general, the biggest struggles you've had and had to overcome as well?
Look, there's lots of things I could say there, and I'm not trying to do a plug, but if you go, I literally did a podcast on leadership last week that was released last week. So if you go to my LinkedIn page and just look for a few posts back, you will see a podcast that I did for 45 minutes only on leadership and on my leadership experiences and so forth. So I'd probably answer by just saying go to the podcast, which is it's a bit of a cop-out, but I'm mindful of time. It's like a 45-minute podcast and I go through a lot of detail. Look, generally for me, I guess more broadly, leadership, I think, we all want to have, and certainly in my career, so before I went to Dymocks, I worked for a relatively short period of time in another retail organisation that I was not aligned to at all, right? I used to stand outside of those shops and just think, this is just not me. So I think purpose is really, really important. And I think when you're leading an organisation, if you can give people a really good reason to get up in the morning and feel good about what they're doing and actually wanting to contribute, and setting that kind of and look, and I don't quote Simon Sinek on a regular basis, but that starts with why mindset. Why do we do what we do? And if you as a leader can be really clear on articulating the why, and then also where we're going, and setting an ambitious plan of this is where we're going to, and then communicating that clearly and effectively across the organisation. I think that's one of many things that I would say, but I think they're kind of core to good leadership. And then I think just being open, communicative, and creating I call them real conversations. It's in the podcast, but creating an environment where people can feel very, very comfortable to challenge you. Like, when you're a CEO, the worst thing that you want is just everybody agreeing with you. And I highly value people within the organisation who can say, Steve, I think you made a mistake, or what about this, or what about that? Like, the worst thing a CEO can have is a whole pile of people that just do whatever the CEO says. So you've got to create an environment of trust, where people feel that they can talk to you, they can challenge you in a constructive way, and it won't be to their detriment, and they don't have to worry about their career or anything like that. In fact, if anyone challenges me, they go up in my markings as far as careers go. I like people who, challenge thinking, come with new ideas, and push the boundaries. And that's what, working is, you're there a lot. It's a relationship. And you've got to be able to sit down and talk to people. And sometimes, like all relationships, individual things can become challenging, particularly when you're in a high pressure, environment. So I think it's real conversations and a clear goal for the organisation more broadly. I think. There was a line that I took from a conversation that came from Adam Goods and then through another team. Performance equals commitment times capability times communication, and I think it's always been a pretty good model. So committed people, so they want to be on the bus to steal from good to great. So I think people who want to be on the bus is really important. And if somebody doesn't want to be on the bus, then help them get off and go and find the career that they're interested in. It'd be better for them and better for the organisation. Capability is really important, but if somebody's committed, I'll be very happy to work with them to build up their capability over time. So that's something you can build, but they've got to be committed to be able to get that as well. But then that X factor, it's the times 3, if you like, to the power of 3, is communication. And communication comes from trust, real conversations, and trying to know people beyond just what you're doing at work. We all have a layer outside of work, talking about kids, family, weekends, interest, sport, what they do, what their talents are, what their passions are, all those kind of things are really important as well.
Well, that's tonight's podcast. We'll get a lot of hits tonight. Just before we go into another question, I think, Nick, obviously, the one thing we're reading, we know about is the lack of staff that's available now in hospo.
Yeah, you will all get
tourism,
jobs, guys, I promise you.
We're hoping, obviously, more international students and more, international workers to eventually make their way here. How is that affecting your business and, I guess, New South Wales tourism generally?
Oh, it affects everything. Vivid was the biggest Vivid ever. The hotels were running at about 81% occupancy. They could have been running at 100% occupancy, but they don't have enough staff. So, so many restaurants in Sydney and all of New South Wales are only opening 5 days a week, not because they don't have demand, they don't have staff. And then what's the underlying thing that's also important to consider is what's the visitor experience like. So if somebody does come here and they go into a restaurant that's understaffed, inexperienced staff, the experience
is bad, they don't go
poor,
back.
and then why would they come back? So it impacts everything across the board, and we work closely with the federal government and with others to try and lobby to improve it. But everything.
That's sort of in our recovery phase, I guess. Another question?
Yeah, hey Steve. Question. So when you're dealing with various senior stakeholders, and everybody's got different objectives and different values in their objectives, what is the best strategy to best reach a consensus across all those stakeholders to reach a consented sort of objective together? What is your strategy for that?
I think I always find, and particularly the more senior stakeholders go, generally I'm either, let's just say I'm dealing with a board or ministers or, premiers and the like. It's having a well-considered and well-thought-through position for what it is that you're putting forward. So I very rarely get a no to something that's got a good business case. It's been well thought through and well considered. And if you can clearly demonstrate what it is you're trying to achieve, that you've got a business case that supports it. So you look at cash flows, you look at the forward years, you're realistic about it, you consider risk factors, all those kind of things, then very, very rarely do I tend to get a no, because you present it well and you engage in that way. Also, I guess, depending on what the issue is or what it is that we're working is, how have you engaged with those stakeholders also? So, if it's a particularly complex issue, so I've got a contract issue with a very large sporting coach at the moment. So the position that I go into with that, I will make sure I get the minister to, I'll brief him, this is what I think should do, Minister, get his feedback and align it before we go back and do it. Same thing with the board. So I guess it varies. If it's a complex issue that's multifaceted, it's about engaging those group of stakeholders. So, and we've all got lots to learn all the time, and I learn from senior people all the time, talking about, here, this is a challenge we're facing. But I think the important thing is always to have a position or a path. There's no point, and I would say to anyone who works for me or anything else, don't just come to me with a problem and go, well, what are we going to do? It's like, you need to come with, this is a challenge. This is what I think we can do. We've given it some thought. And then 9 times out of 10, I'll go, yeah, great, do that or change that or whatever else. So it's putting forward solutions and not just putting forward issues. If issues are complex, it's engaging with the key stakeholders. And I think, one of the biggest lessons I learned actually from when I did my MBA a while back, that's when I really started focusing on my network of people. I think networking is sort of seen as a bit of a dirty word, but I can assure all of you, you need to network and build your network. So if you go to my LinkedIn, and I hope you all become, send me a LinkedIn after this and say, hey, Steve, and we'll connect, because, I can't tell you every single day of every single week, I do things because of the people that I know, and I know who to speak to, and I can pick up the phone to Justin or whoever, it doesn't matter, and just go, what about this, what about that? So I've got a group of people that I call Team Sydney there. You would know all of them, pretty small group. So when we did that ad campaign, not that one, the one that we did for Sydney, I just sent them all the early edits, and I just go, pull it apart, tell me what you like, tell me what you hate. And they were like senior people in you will know every single person on that group, and they would pull it apart and go, hate this, hate that, that's too dark, why are you doing this? I'd send it back to my team, go and fix all that, send it back. So it's working with networks, and the reason why I got this job was all through networks as well. It was the question came at interview, how are you going to deal with being in government? And I said, well, I'll use my networks. And I spoke to a guy that I knew, Jeff Newcomb, who's the head of the Independent Schools Association. Jeff put me in touch with a guy who's the head of study in New South Wales, who I didn't know. And as I sat in the interview, I could say to Simon McGrath, said, you had a beer with him last night, and Kim Curtin, you're his boss. And, I could tell them everything about their businesses. So, work with people
I think
and engage.
that physicality of networking is so important. I think over the last 2 years it's been very hard, particularly with students, because you haven't been able to go anywhere. But I even know in my career, I mean, the contacts that I've made, from you to everyone, is because I've said yes to that invitation to whatever. Sometimes I've gone, I don't really want to go out tonight, but it is always well worth it.
If you
always keep that in mind.
It's really
important.
important.
You ask to something that you might think, do it.
People generally want to help. If you meet great people, like Michael Miller, who's the head of News Corporation, came to my office. At the time, I didn't even know who he was, which is a bit embarrassing. But anyway, he referenced a guy that he did a lot of work with. I took down the guy's name, made a connection. That guy ended up writing my major event strategy. So it's kind of, you've just, it's when you meet people, connect with people, and people want to help.
And it doesn't have to be sycophantic.
It doesn't have to be anything. No, it's just
because you're using your knowledge, and that will then enhance that person's knowledge and vice versa. It is something that will never ever go. I mean, we're all this, but we also need the physicality of meeting people and chatting, and then I'm putting you on to you, and it's very important.
People generally want to help. I had a CEO come and see me last week. She's looking to do a career transition. We had a good conversation. Then I connected her with 5 people, all of whom were CEOs of other organisations, all of whom would be in her ballpark. So it's build your connections as well.
I think there's one more question here. I think that's it, Hello.
Hi, I've got the question about investment perspective. Like, what do you think between investing on new destination, like creating new events or festivals, or investing on pre-existing destinations like operas? What makes more benefit or brings more new customers around the world?
Sure. So you said destinations or events, because you said opera.
Or both of things, like investing on new things or investing on pre-existing or pre-popular things.
It's a balance. It's kind of a balanced portfolio as always. So on average, every dollar we spend in marketing gives us a $10 return. On average, every dollar we spend in events gives us an $8 return. So the decision as to whether or not we reinvest in an event, it comes down to, does it align with our strategy? Does it align with the brand? Is it giving us the return that we want to see from it? And so they're the decisions we make. Well, if I invest in an event, literally what happens is we say, I've got a data team, they will estimate the visitor spend that comes from that event, and we will put a ratio against it. So often it comes down to just the return on the investment. So it could be an event that's been running for a long time, but if the return's great, sometimes then it becomes about how we invest. So something like, the Byron Bay Blues Fest has been on for a long period of time. We don't traditionally invest in that as an event investor, but we invest in it as a marketing investor to drive visitation from Queensland, Victoria and outside of Byron to go to the event. So it really varies. The decision to do new events comes down to a combination of things. Sometimes we'll invest in new events in regional locations if we think that can become a destination event. Again, if it aligns with the brand of that area. then we make an investment. Normally that we intend to get out of those over a period of time, get the event to a certain size so it can stand on its own 2 feet, so we don't have to invest in it anymore after that. If it's a new event like the Opera analogy in Sydney, it really depends on what's new, what's our balanced portfolio, how much other opera, like I've got a very, very, very large opera event in my inbox right now that we are currently assessing, and we will go, how much opera are we already investing in? Is it different to Hosh, which is on the harbour? This year we've got Opera on Cockatoo Island just about to launch. Do we need another opera event? So it's a balanced sort of look at the breadth of the offer. And again, coming back to the visitor, if every event in Sydney is an opera event, they're not going to be terribly happy. So it's those kind of decisions that we make.
I think your new job will be Destination World. It's got that much sort of vision. It's fantastic. Steve, I think that's probably time. I think Nicole's giving me the
wrap up.
Time. Steve Cox, thank you, CEO, Destination New South Wales. Visit New South Wales as much as you can. Pour your money into it. And you're probably going to be all working in it anyway. So thank you all very much.
Thanks, guys.
Steve, thank
Good luck
you
with your
very
studies.
much. And thanks for having me again.